Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Isiah. We have another great show today. We're going to talk about the NBA's best teams finally losing. We'll talk about a team that was struggling and another team that is struggling now. We'll highlight the game of the night between the Heat and the 76ers and talk about the Eastern Conference. And we'll do a quick injury update before talking about top performances of the last few days to round out the show. So let's jump in. The Lakers and the Bucks, we've been talking about them a lot, at least I have in the last couple of podcasts. They've been the best in the NBA so far, and so it has seemed like they've been untouchable as of late. But the Bucks lost the other night to the Dallas Mavericks, 120-116, and this is shocking to me because the Bucks have been so good. They were on their home floor, and the Mavericks were without Luka Doncic, who we've also talked about a lot. He's one of the star players in the NBA as of right now. He was Rookie of the Year last year, and he's just been the main catalyst for the Mavericks this season. And to not have him in this game, I thought for sure it was an easy win for the Bucks. But the Mavs are proving to be a team that can be versatile and rely on other players other than Luka Doncic. It's like the saying go, one man goes down, the next step up. So they have to have that mentality, and they did this game, obviously, if they took down the Milwaukee Bucks. So we're going to go down into a little breakdown of the game. A little back information first. The Mavericks' greatest streak that they snapped was 12, and that actually happened twice in 2011. They beat the Spurs and the Heat, so two great teams back then. I believe that was actually the NBA Finals that year. So for them to break that streak, they've been great teams in the past. Obviously, that was a while ago, but now they've broken a streak of 18 games. And it all had to do with the way the Mavericks came out. They came out hot from three, and they led the majority of this game, actually. The Bucks were trailing for a long portion of the game, couldn't really find any offensive rhythm. And then they finally take the lead for the first time in the third quarter, and it was short-lived. The Mavericks took it back, and they pretty much ran away with it. There was a little scare. The Bucks were playing the foul game, kept trying to send the Dallas Mavericks to the line because obviously they had the lead late in the game. And the Bucks were playing this foul game really well. Mavericks missed a couple, and then every inbound, the Bucks just took the ball and sprinted it up the court and got some quick buckets, quick layups. They actually had the ball with 5 seconds left, and they were down by 3, but they ended up turning it over out of bounds, and it really just crumbled from there. Dallas Mavericks were able to hold on, and they got the win. And there were a couple of reasons why this happened. A big X factor in this game was Seth Curry. Seth Curry is a player that can be really good in this league if given the right opportunity. He thought he found it a couple years ago when he was on the Dallas Mavericks already, and then he got traded away. Ended up at the Trailblazers, where he did a great job there last year, especially in the playoffs before the Warriors took them down. But he really was productive for the Blazers, and they thought maybe that could be a permanent home for him as well, going behind Lillard and McCollum. But obviously that didn't happen, and now he's ended up here, back with the Dallas Mavericks, and he's getting another opportunity, and he's taking it. He's averaging just 9 points, at least coming into this game. And 2 games before this game against the Milwaukee Bucks, he had 30 points. Well, tonight, he did it again. He backed it up with another great performance. He had 26 points in 21 minutes, so he was extremely efficient. He had 5 rebounds and 4 assists. That's coming off the bench. So for him to be productive like that coming off the bench is really impressive, especially since you don't have your top scorer in Luka Doncic. So you need people to, take upon the load upon themselves and find ways to find the basket. And he is a flamethrower from the three-point land as his family precedes him. Del Curry, obviously, a legend from three-point land. Steph Curry, his brother, going to be a future Hall of Famer, 3-time champion, one of the best three-point shooters ever, if not the best. So he's got it in his blood, and it really shows sometimes, that he's part of this family too. People sleep on him, but he's a great player. If he could just find a great opportunity, maybe it can happen here with the Mavericks, but it was a good performance tonight. Also, Porzingis was really, really good. He had 26 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks. And I said it a few podcasts ago when I broke down the Dallas Mavericks that a lot of the pressure is put on Luka Doncic to carry this team, but Porzingis is just as good, if not better, when he's at his peak because of his size and because of his versatility. He can actually handle the ball pretty well for how tall he is. He's a big body, so he's super aggressive when he goes at the rim, especially nowadays, because he's bulked up quite a bit. He was very tall and lanky, kind of how Giannis started when he came into the league. Porzingis was pretty much the same way, and then he had that injury, so he got set back quite a bit, but he hasn't really found his rhythm as of yet, at least not yet, but he shows flashes. Like I said, 26 points in this game, 12 rebounds. That's a big game for a big guy, and he does it in so many different ways. He was very aggressive towards the rim. He got a bunch of dunks, and then he can also extend his range as well. Some of the shots that he took from deep were crazy. I mean, there's Steph Curry range, and this is like a near 7-footer, possible center, mostly a power forward, but possibly a center who's shooting from this deep. And for him to do that is just very strange and very unusual, but he does it so well that it's very impressive. We also talked about how because Luka Doncic is going down, they would need someone stepping up as the point guard, and JJ Barea seems like the obvious choice since he's a veteran and he's been in this league for a while. He's been doing it for a while, and he's productive. He finds ways to score. He's played really well when Luka Doncic did go down, but he did not play in this game against the Milwaukee Bucks. Instead, it was Brunson who started, and he actually was very, very productive. He had 13 points and 11 assists, so you can't really ask much more from a backup point guard, especially if he gets 11 assists. I mean, that's the main job of the point guard, at least in the old days, is to run the offense and find the open man and get assists racked up. He also added 13 points too, so that's a quiet double-double, but he got it, and he helped his team to a victory. Also, Dorian Finney-Smith added 15 of his own, and DeLon Wright scored 13, so it was really just a great effort all around from the Dallas Mavericks, and for them to play as well as they did as a team is the reason why they took down such a great Milwaukee Bucks side. And it's no fault at all to Giannis because he had an amazing game. It's really a shame that he played as well as he did and he couldn't get the win because he had 48 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, and a block. But that was pretty much it for the Milwaukee Bucks. The next highest scorer was Korver coming off the bench, and he had 17. So if Korver is your next highest scorer, you're having an issue, especially if he's coming off the bench. Korver is a great player, and he's a great sharpshooter, but he doesn't, at least not anytime recently, he hasn't been as this productive, so you can't really expect that much from him. He did have a 17, which is great. The next highest scorer was Ilyasova with 11, and George Hill with 10, so there wasn't a lot of people contributing in terms of big numbers to help out Giannis, but this is why they fell a little bit short, and you expect more from players, especially like Middleton, who is an all-star caliber player and who just got a big max contract as well, so he's got to live up to that. He's got some pressure on him to perform, and he just didn't this tonight. I don't think it's a big deal, especially for a team that has barely lost this year, so they're probably not thinking too much of it. It might be nice, actually, for them to have this streak snapped because there's not as much pressure about maintaining it. And a lot of people do put pressure on that because when you have a streak as good as that, you're expected to win all the time. It reminds me a lot of when the Golden State Warriors started 24-0. There were a lot of times during that streak where it could have ended a lot sooner than it did. but it didn't because, they found ways to win. But unfortunately, the Bucks streak does end at 18, but it was a very great run for them. And I don't think they, put their heads down after this loss. Definitely not. And on the other side, the Lakers had an opportunity to, leapfrog the Bucks as the best team in the NBA. Because the Bucks lost, they could finally not be tied in their record standpoint. But they lose too. They lost to the Indiana Pacers. And I told you guys last time, they are a dark horse in the league. They can be extremely good. And they have a lot of potential to them. LeBron had a near triple-double. He had 20 points and 9 rebounds and 9 assists. So there's nothing wrong with what LeBron did. He played a great game. He probably could have scored a bit more, especially with the way that it's just so easy for him to score. It's so easy for him to find the basket and just get to the rim. It's just so easy for him. And also, the way that he plays as a point guard is so nice. He has these great lobs up to the rim, and it's easy for him because he's got JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard slamming him down. But some of these passes behind the back, over the head, they're exceptional passes for a player of his size to be making, but the amount of skill that he has is the reason why he could pull it off. A lot of what I see him do, especially in the fast break, reminds me a lot of Magic Johnson, so I think that's a very good comparison, at least for the passing-wise. And Giannis said it best. Giannis recently called LeBron an alien because it's ridiculous the way that he's playing at 34. The guy just doesn't slow down. He's in his constant prime. And he shows no sign of slowing down at all. Maybe last year a little bit, but he's picked it right back up where he left off. We'll break down this game just a little bit too. The Pacers took the lead for the first time in the third quarter. They were trailing for a while. And then they went on a run where they were up by 10 at some point. Then the Lakers came back on their own and took it back by the end of the third. The Pacers kept inching away from the Lakers, but they just wouldn't leave. The Lakers kept staying around. They regained the lead with 4 left with a Danny Green 3, and then a Howard dunk put them up. And late in the game, Brogdon responded with a big 3. Then with 36 seconds left, Brogdon had a very acrobatic reverse layup right past Dwight Howard, which was really, really nice to see because Brogdon isn't a really big-time player. At least he hasn't broken out onto the scene yet. He has had flashes and moments where he can be great, and this is one of them for sure. We'll talk a little bit more about him later on. Rondo had a potential game-tying 3. Right, Rajon Rondo with the game-tying 3. You know that's not going to go well. It actually went better than most people would expect. He shot this shot from deep, so I expected an air ball. But it actually went in and out. And so the Pacers hold on for a win, a big win against, a great LA Lakers team. And they performed pretty well, too, all around. Caruso had really big minutes. He had 11 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists. And he was plus 9, which was a lot better than a lot of the Lakers players in the game. So that was a good sign for him. He had some great passes as well for those assists. Dwight Howard Caruso had big minutes, but Howard had bigger minutes. He was 10 for 10, had 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 blocks. So he protected the rim. He caught a bunch of lobs and had this one great and one finish. Obviously, he didn't make the free throw, but for him to finish and get fouled was pretty impressive. So Dwight Howard had a really great game. But like I said, the Pacers held on, and they had 4 starters in double figures. Sabonis, we'll talk more about his performance later, but he had the most points with 26. Turner had 16 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 steals, and 2 blocks. So he was just all around fantastic on the hardwood. Brogdon had 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists. Hit a big 3 real late to bring them within 2. And so they were all productive, and they put in good shifts. And because they played so great as a team, a very team collective performance is the reason why they beat this team. But there is a big but in this game. The LA Lakers did not have Anthony Davis. So even though the Pacers played a great game, I think that if the Lakers were at full strength and had Anthony Davis, it wouldn't have been a victory for the Pacers. So even though these teams did just lose, talking about the Lakers and the Bucks, they aren't on as big of a lose streak as this team. And no, I'm not talking about the Pelicans, so stay tuned and find out who I'm talking about next.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about the two juggernauts of the NBA, the LA Lakers and the Milwaukee Bucks. They actually lost the game. It's not a big deal because these two teams are at the top of the league, so then they have some breathing room as well. But for them to lose in a 2-day span was pretty interesting to see, especially since the Milwaukee Bucks had an 18-game winning streak. But that's all right. We're not worried about that too much. We are going to talk about a team that has been struggling as of late. If you listened to my previous podcast, you'd probably guess the Pelicans, but no, it's the Timberwolves, who lost to the Pelicans. So let's give some back info first. This is a big deal. Timberwolves have been struggling. They started out pretty well. A lot of people were surprised with how productive Towns and Wiggins have been. Wiggins is a guy that a lot of people hailed could be a big superstar in this league and just hasn't really lived up to that expectation. He's kind of been flirting with the idea of being a star in this league. But he started out pretty well at the beginning of the season. Same with Cat. He's such a big guy and has a lot of elements to his game that can make him probably one of the best centers in this league if he had an outside shot especially. But yeah, these two were killing it pretty well in the beginning. They were 10-8 for a minute. They beat teams like the Nets, the Heat, Wizards, Jazz. So they were getting some pretty good victories against pretty good opponents as well. But I'm not really sure what happened to them. They've lost 7 straight now. And worst of all, they just lost to the Pelicans, who were on, I believe, a 13-game losing streak. And this Minnesota team also lost twice to the Grizzlies, who really have no one but John Morant and a couple of pieces around him. But the Grizzlies don't have a lot going for them, so to lose to them twice is kind of interesting to see, especially because the Timberwolves, they have a squad. I mean, their offense is pretty good. It's 6th in the league, apparently, with about 114 points per game. But their biggest problem is on the defensive end. They're ranked 23rd in defense and give up 118 points per game, which is 3rd worst in the NBA. So you are scoring a lot on the offensive end, but if you're not stopping them on the defensive end and you're giving up 118 points, there's no way that you're going to outscore them. I mean, they are scoring 114 points per game, which is impressive, but to give up 118 just means it's poor defense. And in this NBA, teams are going to torch you like that. So, like I said, they do have a decent squad. I think Jeff Teague is a player that has been underwhelming. I think he can be a lot more than what he shows. Right now, he has 14.4 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 6.8 assists on the season, which are decent stats, but for a starting point guard in this league at this point, it's turned into a point guard's league, so he needs to be a little more productive than that. Wiggins, we talked about, has been pretty productive this year. He has 25 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 3.3 assists. I still think he can go another level. That 5.1 rebounds can definitely go up. He can definitely crash the boards a little more. Help out his boy Cat, who has been killing it this year. He's averaging a double-double. He has 26.5 points, 11.7 rebounds, and 4.4 assists. So Cat has been producing, and he's been doing well. But without, team chemistry and a team around you, you're not going to get very far. And I think that's why they're probably going on a 7-game losing streak as of right now. They also have pieces like Josh Okogie, who could be good. Robert Covington, Jarrett Culver, and Napier too, who's a pretty good backup point guard. So they have decent pieces to be successful. But I feel like it's never really been a good situation in Minnesota. I'm not really sure what it is, but there's always just been this dark cloud over them, especially as of late, the years with Wiggins and Towns and Teague, to be fair. And even when Derrick Rose was there as well, I think a lot of times this team's been hyped up. They think that they're about to make a break to be one of the best teams in the NBA, but something always holds them back. And I'm not sure exactly what it is. Maybe it's just not a winning mentality. But nevertheless, NOLA gets a dub. They finally snap their losing streak. We talked about their woes last podcast, and it's nice to see that they had a change of fortune. I mean, it's definitely important for a team that's on such a big losing streak to finally get that win, get that monkey off their back, and just find ways to be productive now and move forward, move past this. Now it's in the past, and just look forward to the future and what they're doing. So hopefully they can build off this win and be a team that, people expected to be a lot better than they are now. NOLA was coming off a loss to Brooklyn. Dinwiddie had a great game in that game and stopped them. So tonight was a different story, obviously. Brandon Ingram led the way. He had 34 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 1 block. That is the type of performance I think can be expected of him. I've talked about it before. He's had comparisons to Kevin Durant. I don't necessarily see them, but if he's productive like this and finds ways to score in a numerous amount of ways, whether it's his post-up game, going in and driving to the basket, fading away, hitting threes, whatever it may be, if he can put up points like this, obviously it's tough to score 34, but if he could average around 25 to 29 points per game, I think that's manageable for him. And with his length and with his size, I think he could definitely bulk up as well, start crashing the defensive boards a little more. 6 rebounds per game is a little low for a guy of his size, I think. 5 assists is pretty impressive, though, because I don't necessarily see him handling the ball that much, so that just means he's giving that extra pass to teams. And 3 steals, that's a great performance. So I really think he could be something great in this league. Drew Holiday, he's always consistent. He put in 18 points, 3 assists, and 3 rebounds. Redick also added 12 after sitting out last game due to a groin injury, so it was probably good for him to get that rest, make sure his body's right, and then he's one of the sharpshooters in this league as well, who just finds ways to score, and he's a marksman. You give him the ball behind the three-point line, and he's going to knock it down. Favors, he only had 6 points in this game, but he did have a block and 11 rebounds, so the big man did put in a shift and played his part in this game. Lonzo had decent stats, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists coming off the bench, which I think is pretty impressive for him to get in double figures. I think he can definitely score a little more, and if he gets more minutes, he could definitely give more dimes. But that's a pretty solid performance from him. And then another 11 from Hart. I think this was a really good team victory, just like how it was against the Milwaukee Bucks for the Mavericks. It's team victories that are going to lead to success. And so it's probably really nice for them to get away from that losing streak. The real reason why I think they lost, though, Minnesota lost, is because they shot terrible. Absolutely terrible. They shot 37.9% from the field and 25.6% from 3. They also missed 10 free throws, and they lost by 8. So you do the math. I think they would have won if they made all their free throws. But going back to those percentages, if you shoot under 40% from the field, you're not giving yourself a good chance to be successful. And 25% from 3 in a league where the 3 ball is as important as it is at this point, there's no way you're going to win any games like that. So it's really tough for Minnesota to swallow, I'm sure. But there's definitely a lot of potential in Minnesota if they could just find ways to be more productive, be a little bit better on the defensive end. I mean, you're giving up a lot of points to a team that's been struggling, which makes no sense. New Orleans has been terrible this year, and they still gave up a whole bunch of points and lost the game. So not sure, when the Timberwolves are going to turn things around, if they ever are, but a team that has turned things around at least for this season, is the Miami Heat. I'll break their game down against the 76ers coming up next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how Minnesota has been struggling this year, as of late at least. They're on a 7-game losing streak right now, and to make matters worse, they just lost to the New Orleans Pelicans, who have been atrocious, especially as of late. I think they were on a 13-game losing streak that just got snapped, so it can't get worse for Minnesota right now. And I'm not sure when they're going to turn things around, but the Heat have turned things around, and they've got it going on right now, at least this season. They have been tremendous. I mean, it's kind of miraculous how good they've gotten, and they haven't really acquired that many pieces to make them that good, but I think they just have great team chemistry, and their rookies really are shining. But they did have a big game in the East. They were playing the 76ers. If you guys tuned into my last podcast, they were both in the category of who's hot versus who's not. They were high on my list for teams that are hot in the league right now. They were 2-3 coming into this matchup, 2-3 in the East. And so I think in a matchup like this, I was definitely thinking that the 76ers had them. I said it last week. I put Miami farther down than the 76ers on my rankings just because I don't think they have what it takes to sustain a full 82-game season and be this competitive, but clearly they listened to my podcast and they were pissed, so they went off and beat the 76ers, a team that, should be second in the East probably at the end of it all, but they had a great game. It was the final score was 108-104, and this was a crazy game. This actually ended up being the 76ers' first home loss, which I thought was pretty impressive, that they haven't lost at home yet. Definitely want to make your home court a fortress, and they had that going on for them. But the Heat used a big second quarter to take a lead that they would pretty much just hold on to until the very end of the game. They scored 37 in the second quarter after trailing, and they went up by 8 at the half. And a lot of what the Heat were doing in this game, they just had great ball movement. They had opportunities where they could score, but they passed it one more time to a player that was even more open. And they just really found good ways to get to the basket and get easy buckets, which made it easier for them to balloon the lead to 16 in the fourth quarter, especially when Kendrick Nunn fired a 3 from deep. And Adebayo as well had another great game. He's really coming to his own this season. The 76ers were down 4 with a little over a minute to play, and Derrick Jones Jr. hit a big 3 over Horford to extend the lead a little more, make it a little more comfortable. The Sixers were still fighting as Simmons stole the ball and Embiid finished it off with an and one, but he did miss the free throw. Harris had a really big 3 late in the game for the 76ers, and they were down 2. Al Horford had a chance to take the lead, but he actually ended up missing, and it had a big rebound from Adebayo, and he was boxing out Embiid. And I'll tell you why that's a really big thing for Adebayo to do, because Embiid had a monster game, especially on the boards. He had 19 rebounds. So for Adebayo to box out Embiid and fend off a player that's been playing ridiculously well this season, is definitely a big moment for him, and it was clutch as well. Every stat between these two teams were very even when it came to field goals made, three-pointers made, free throws made, assists, and etc. The difference between them was the efficiency of the Heat. They shot 47% from the field goal range versus 41% for the 76ers. And they shot 38.7% from three versus 30% from three for the 76ers. So they really were just a lot more efficient with their shot taking, probably better shots as well. Like I said, they were moving the ball really well, finding good open shooters and getting easy buckets. So that definitely helps your average, and I bet you that's why they ended up winning this game. But it's no fault of the 76ers. Their starting five really performed. Embiid especially, he had 22 points, 19 rebounds, like I said before, had 3 assists, and he also had 2 blocks and a steal. So we talked about it last podcast, how the 76ers lost the game, but they didn't have Joel Embiid. And I said that that's a big reason why they lost, because he's just a big impact player. I mean, when you have a guy that can score 22 points and add 19 rebounds to that, you can't really replace that. I mean, players can definitely step up, but to have one player do all of that is astronomically important to your success. 19 rebounds is unheard of. He almost got a 20-20 game, which for a big man would be really impressive. But yeah, his impact in the game is definitely missed whenever he's not in there. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to get the win tonight, but it just speaks to his greatness to come back into this game and score 22 points and get 19 boards. It's a great game for him. Ben Simmons, he had 17 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 1 block. So he was extremely productive as well. Had a very great overall, all-around game. I definitely think he needs to start scoring more because they don't have a pure scorer on their team. So they need to put it in different. They need to get it from different places. And Embiid's only going to be doing so much because, you know, he's a center. He's not going to have the ball in his hands that much. And you don't want to play a lot of iso ball, especially down low. But I think Simmons is a player that's athletic enough, aggressive enough, and big enough to be able to drive to the basket and get more and get to the line more. Even though he's not a great shooter, I still think it's important to get there and at least get fouled and get the opportunity to do so. So I think Simmons can definitely boost up his numbers in that sense. He probably can get more assists as well. He's got the most carries on the team, so 6 assists is a little low for him. It's still a productive night, though. Tobias Harris had a great game as well. He had 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. So that's a pretty productive game. I think he can definitely help out more on the boards. Only 4 rebounds when Embiid had 19. So maybe that's why Harris didn't have that many rebounds, because Embiid was eating them all. But I still think he's a big guy, and he can definitely get down low and box out some people and get some more boards for his team. I think Josh Richardson played really well too. He had 17 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1 block. That's extremely productive from him, and can't really complain about that. But they had 5 people coming off the bench, and their total points tally was 19 points. It's just not enough. They didn't have enough productivity from the bench, and that's a big reason why, you know, they couldn't push for anything more. They had to keep playing their starters, and maybe they burned out by the end. But on the other side of the ball, the Heat played really well. Kendrick Nunn in particular had a fantastic game, and let me remind you guys, he's just a rookie, so he played really well in this game. He had 26 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists with a steal, and he was 4 from 8 from 3, so he was shooting 50% from 3, and he had a plus-minus of plus 19. So to be that productive when he's on the court is definitely a good sign for the rookie. He had a great game, and he's definitely starting to really battle John Morant for the title of Rookie of the Year. It's obviously a long season. There's a lot of basketball left to play, but he's really coming into his own and definitely going to challenge for that Rookie of the Year title. Adebayo had another great game as well. 23 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists with 2 steals and 2 blocks. So he did it on both ends of the floor. He got buckets, he got boards, and he also protected the rim. 2 blocks at the rim, the game-clinching rebound after boxing out Embiid. So he just had a monster performance, and I really think he has a lot of potential to be great in this league, and he's showing it. He's starting to really improve, and because the Heat are doing so well, there's a lot more attention on him, and it's definitely valid because he's been playing really well. Duncan Robinson also added 15 points. Jimmy Butler had 14 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists with 2 steals. You definitely would expect Jimmy Butler, of all people, to score a lot more, but he has these games where he just starts to take a back seat to what's going on and kind of just see where else he can impact the game. He doesn't necessarily shoot a lot. In this game, he shot 5 for 11, which is why he only had 14 points. But I still think a player like Jimmy Butler, especially on a young Miami Heat team, needs to be more aggressive. He needs to go at the basket. He needs to find different ways to shoot, get to the line, because he is an all-star caliber player. And so he needs to be the leader for this team. And even though he impacted in different ways by getting the 7 boards, adding 5 assists, what have you, he needs to be more productive in the points category if this Miami Heat team want to sustain what they've been doing since the beginning of the season. They did have 3 people coming off the bench, and they scored 24. So 24 from 3 players coming off the bench versus 5 people scoring 19 off the bench for the 76ers. That plays a factor as well. And yeah, the Miami Heat take it away. Derrick Jones Jr. especially had 13 points, 6 rebounds, and Harrell off the bench as well. He almost had a very quiet triple-double. He had 9 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists. And let me remind you, again, he's also a rookie, and he has been great this year. A lot of people are talking about him and how he's been a great flamethrower from behind the arc. So he's another reason why this Miami Heat's doing so well. But I still stand by what I said. I'm not completely sold on the Heat just yet. They have decent players and have good team chemistry, but I still think the 76ers are better. They underperform a lot, to be honest, but the 76ers can definitely make a push to be a great team in this league. These two are juggernauts in the East and are pretty close from a record standpoint. So just how close is the entire East? I'll tell you after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We just broke down 2 great East teams, at least for this year, the Miami Heat and the 76ers. They squared off in an early postseason matchup to see, which team is better in the East right now, at least from just this game standpoint. And we obviously know that they're at the top of the league, but what else is going on in the East? We talked a bit ago about how the West is super close, 2 through 5. We talked about it in my very first podcast. But the East is really close too. At the top, there are the Milwaukee Bucks. Duh, that's a no-brainer. They're really, really good. They're 24-4 right now. They score 121 points per game and give up 108 points per game for a differential of plus 12.9. That's an absolute dominant team. If you're in first place and you're winning all your games by this margin, it speaks a lot to their greatness. And they did just lose, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, but that really doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. It's very early on in the season. There are 82 games in this season. I don't think they're going to sweat it if they lose one game, especially since they're on an 18-game losing streak. And so that's behind them. They're not really worried about that. As of right now, Boston is in second. They're 18-7, and the reason they're in second is because they have the least amount of losses compared to people that are behind them with more wins. They are 7-3 in their last 10 games, and they just beat the Mavericks, who don't have Luka Doncic, but still, this was a really big game for them. Kemba is leading in points and assists, 23.1 and 5.3, respectively. So he's been really productive. I think we've talked about this just a little bit. The Celtics are a team that can be a force in the East if they get the right chemistry going, the right productivity from the right people. And Kemba is definitely, has to be the leader of this team. It was Kyrie last year, but the chemistry didn't really work amongst the team with him at the helm. And so they wanted to switch things up after Kyrie left. And Kemba was the perfect guy for this, I think. I think he's been another guy that's been floating around stardom. He had a lot of great moments at Charlotte, but he never had pieces around him. And now that he's at the Celtics, there's a reason why he's doing so well, and they are in second place right now. It's because he's at the helm, and I think he is a great leader. And for them to just beat the Mavericks, I think is a big sign, even if they don't have Doncic, because they're still a force out in the West. I also think that Jason Tatum can be a star in this league. I mean, his rookie year campaign was one to really follow because just how much hype there was around him, Donovan Mitchell, and Ben Simmons. The three-legged race between those three was crazy. I mean, it literally could have gone any direction, and I think people would have been fine with it because they all had great seasons. Definitely didn't expect him to be that good, even if he was a number 3 pick in the draft. He really has came into his own. He carried them in the playoffs last year when Kyrie went down, so they really looked to him to take on the load. Obviously, they didn't make it that far, but for him to be the guy that they go to for as young as he is definitely a good sign for what he can bring in the future. Right now, he's averaging 20.6 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 2.9 assists per game. So he's definitely, in that transitional period where he can go from really good role player to a star player and a leader on this team. And I think it's important that he has a player like Kemba Walker on his team who is definitely a pass-first type of point guard. He obviously creates his own shots, but he's going to be feeding Jason Tatum for years to come, I think. Jaylen Brown is another one that I think is floating around superstardom, at least for the last 3 seasons. Right now, he's averaging 19.3 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 2.2 assists. He has a lot of pieces that can make him a great player in this league. I think he's just lacking consistency and maybe some confidence at times. 19.3 points per game is definitely not high enough for a player of Jaylen Brown's stature, especially since he was pushing to have a max contract from the Boston Celtics. So if you want a contract like that, you have to put up numbers like that. And I don't think he's just there yet, but he definitely has a lot of potential. He's still pretty young, and there's a lot of upside to him, so the Celtics are pretty good with him as well. Gordon Hayward is another player who could be great on this Celtics team when he's healthy. He hasn't been the same since his days at the Jazz, where he was a force to be reckoned with, probably one of the best players in this league. And when he went to the Celtics, originally people thought it's over. The Celtics are going to be the ones to take down the Warriors and be a team that's going to be dominant for years to come. But he just hasn't been the same since his big injury. But when he gets back there, plus all the players that I mentioned before for the Celtics, they're going to be dangerous. They also have Marcus Smart, who's really good. They also have Enes Kanter, who I think was a really good pickup. He's obviously not going to be a big number guy, but he can be productive coming off the bench. He's got 7.9 points and 6 rebounds to add, here and there. So I definitely think that's a good pickup too. They have ways of beating the big teams as well. This year they've beaten the Mavericks, the Nuggets, the Heat, and the Bucks early on. They were one of the first people to beat them. They also beat the Toronto Raptors, and every time that they lose, it's really close contest. So this team is really, really competitive, and this is the reason why they're in second place. I think they can probably end up in the top 3 in the East if they stay consistent enough. As of right now, the Heat are in third. They've been very consistent, and we kind of broke them down a little bit when we talked about their game against the 76ers. And, they're doing really, really well this season. Kendrick Nunn, like I said, coming into his own. Harrow as well, another great rookie. Hero, great rookie. Adebayo coming into his own. And Jimmy Butler. If you have Jimmy Butler on your team, you have a competitive team because he has a big competitive nature. We've heard it before. And, he's going to make this team really work and really become a great team, I think. They also are doing all of this right now without Dragic, who will be their starting point guard, and Winslow, who can definitely add a lot, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. So they have a lot of good pieces, and they can be very dangerous. The Toronto Raptors are next. They are 19-8 and are in fourth, but they could be in second or third with just a game played. And they're only in front of the 76ers right now because they have less losses. They're fifth in defensive rating. They're a great defensive team. They don't do a lot of other things exponentially well, but they do everything consistent, and they do it well enough to win games. And because they're so good defensively, that's good enough. Van Vliet really broke out in the playoffs last year, especially in the series against the Warriors. He torched them and played really well. And he hasn't really slowed down this year either. He's got 18 points per game, 3.7 rebounds per game, and 7 assists. And he's coming off the bench. He's your backup point guard, and he's a total stud. He can shoot these crazy three-pointers as well that are just getting shot up into the stratosphere and coming back down and making it these big rainbow shots. But he seems to always make them, and when he drives to the rim as well, even if he's small and you think he's going to get blocked, he's very crafty. He finds ways to kiss it off the glass and get it down, so he's been very productive. Kyle Lowry, obviously the starting point guard, staple for the Raptors. He's a little overrated, in my opinion. I've never really thought he's been that great, but obviously a lot of people do. He's been an all-star for many years, and stats don't lie, so I can't really hate. He's got 19 points and 7.1 assists with 4.7 rebounds. So that's pretty productive. I mean, that's kind of the numbers you want from your point guard. I think he definitely can increase his productivity in terms of his points. 19 points seems a little low for him, especially since he should be shooting more now that, he's pretty much the guy they give the ball to at this point. But 7.1 assists is pretty good. Norman Powell is having a career year. This is the most points he's averaged in a season, or the most points he averaged in a season was 8.6, but right now he's averaging 14.6 plus almost 4 rebounds per game, which is up from his career average of 2.3. So, I mean, it's another sign of losing a big quality player and seeing who's going to step up next. They lost Kawhi Leonard, who was everything to this team, at least last year. He was a big reason why they were so good in the playoffs, a big reason why they were so competitive, because Kawhi Leonard is a player that can do everything on the floor. So now Norman Powell is getting a better opportunity, and you see his career averages, or he's going over all his career averages because he's getting more productivity. So that's definitely a good sign to see for the Raptors. But the guy on this team is Pascal Siakam. He had a breakout year last year, and he now has 25 points, 8.2 rebounds, and 3.6 assists. So he's having a great year. In any other year, he probably would be having an MVP caliber year, but people are just going off this year. They don't really know what's going on. But Pascal Siakam is a player that, can do it all. He finds ways to score in the most unorthodox ways. Although he does have a lot of clean technical and footwork ability as well. But some of the fadeaways he hits is just very, very impressive to see. He's also such a force on the defensive end. He can guard all 5 positions. He reminds me a lot of Draymond Green In terms of guarding all 5 positions, he's just a little leaner than Green is. He's got great length to him, so he can get some blocks, get some steals. And he's a real big reason why this team is so competitive. They also added Marc Gasol, which I thought when they did that it was over, because Marc Gasol is a player that is very, very good. I mean, his years on the Grizzlies, he was a big reason why they were so good. Him and Conley were a great tandem, and the Grizzlies were always in the playoffs because of those two. But obviously he's a lot older now, so he's not as productive. He's got 6.8 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. So they're not great numbers from somebody I expected to be their starting center, but the person that is picking up the slack is Serge Ibaka. Serge Ibaka has 12.3 points, 7.1 rebounds, and 1.3 assists. And he's pretty old too, so for him being this productive is a great sign to see. He's been a very good player for the Raptors, and he's been there for a couple of years now, and he just is a good veteran presence for this team, especially when they just won a championship, so everyone's going to go after them. And I think, having a player like him definitely calms them down. We round out with 76ers in 5th, which we've talked about a lot already, and then the Indiana Pacers are in 6th, and we broke them down earlier when discussing their game against the Lakers. To me, they're a dark horse team. They're a really good team. Other teams to look out for, in my opinion, are the Nets, who are getting Kyrie back. We'll talk more about that in a bit. And they're already playing really well, and they're in 7th, so they can definitely be a dangerous team. The Wizards, as well, are underperforming, in my opinion. They can do better, especially with a player like Bradley Beal. He's averaging 27.8 points per game, 4.7 rebounds, and 7 assists. So he's still very productive, still an all-star caliber player, but he can't really do it all by himself. He does have Isiah Thomas, who is kind of making a comeback. I mean, he obviously is not what he used to be at the Boston Celtics. He was phenomenal that year before they traded him for Kyrie, which I still think is really messed up. But he was, fantastic that season, and he's nowhere near that anymore. But he is putting up pretty decent numbers. He's got 13.2 points and 5.1 assists per game in this year, so he's pretty good. The Pistons, I think, could be really good. They have Drummond, they have Blake Griffin, and they have Reggie Jackson. That should be a big 3 right there. I'm not really sure what's wrong with them. I think maybe it has to do with their chemistry, but really not sure what to chalk it up for that. The Bulls could be potentially good, especially because they have Zach LaVine. He's a player that has the ability just to take over a game whenever he decides to, so definitely interesting to see. Going back to the Washington Wizards for a second, they don't have John Wall, which I think is a big reason why they're not as good as they can be. And he doesn't get back until May, so that definitely hurts. But the Wizards still have some decent pieces to be competitive, in my opinion. But speaking of having Wall out for a while, other teams have been losing players due to injuries, but how much is it affecting them? Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about an Eastern Conference team that has been very competitive, a league that, a conference that people haven't really taken seriously in the past couple of years just because of how good the Western Conference has been. But this year, the Eastern Conference has a lot of really competitive teams, and it's very close, at least 2 through 6. They're all separated by a game or less. So it's definitely interesting to see how that'll turn out to be, 82 games after the season is over. Now we're kind of switching gears. We're going to talk about some injuries happening around the league, give a little update on that. Otto Porter Jr., he's coming back January 15th from a foot injury. The Bulls are 11th in the East right now, and Otto Porter Jr. is the highest paid player on the team. And he only played 9 games this year. So you would think that having a player like him back could definitely help, especially help Zach LaVine, who has been pretty much a one-man show down in Chicago. I mean, he's got rookie Kobe White and a couple other pieces marketing as well, but no real superstars. And so having Otto Porter Jr. back and contribute some numbers, his numbers early on weren't that great, 11.2 points, 3.4 rebounds, and 1.6 assists. But if he's getting paid as much as he is, he definitely should be a lot more productive. And joining a Bulls team that can be scrappy and can find ways to win definitely will, benefit from having him back. Karl Anthony Towns is actually out with a knee injury right now. He should be expected back soon. He is a player that is a lot like Joel Embiid. I mean, if he's not playing for his Minnesota team, they're going to be struggling, and because of his impact. He scores 26.5 points per game, 11.7 rebounds per game, and 4.4 assists. So having those numbers dropped from your squad is always gonna hurt. I mean, he's averaging a double-double like we talked earlier in the podcast. So he's definitely a player that can take over a game and be very productive. So it'll be nice to have him back soon. Marc Gasol, we talked a little bit about, has a hamstring injury, and Van Vliet has a knee injury. They're both expected back pretty soon, but having those two out definitely hurts. Like I said, I think Gasol has been underperforming. He has slowed down quite a bit from his best. He's not averaging a lot of points per game anymore, but he definitely is a player that can flip the switch and just produce out of nowhere. So having him available at the very least, it would definitely help. And then Van Vliet, like we talked about, he's a stud. He's really broken out and become a player that is fighting for minutes. And the only reason why he's not getting as many minutes as he can is because Kyle Lowry is standing in front of him. So having them two back will only make the Toronto Raptors better, and they're already doing pretty well in the East right now. Switching over to the West Coast, Eric Gordon, he's still out with a knee injury, and he won't be coming back until the new year. Eric Gordon has been a staple for the Houston Rockets as of late, the last few years. He's been a guy who's been in contention for the Sixth Man of the Year for a while now. The Rockets have always been pretty good, and having him come off the bench has been a luxury for them because he's been very consistent, finds ways to score. He's a big pit bull, but without him, it hurts because you only have James Harden, Russell Westbrook. Those two obviously going to be very productive, but then who after that? Capella has moments where he could be really good, but you can't rely on PJ Tucker to get you a bunch of buckets. So Eric Gordon's got to be that guy. He has been pretty low compared to his career stats. He's actually way down in those categories. Right now, he's averaging 10.9 points per game, 1.9 rebounds, and 0.8 assists, which is really bad. He's shooting 30.9% from the field and 28.4% from three. I think what this is just because he started off a little slow. We're still pretty early on into the NBA season, and so we know how productive he can be. We know he could definitely shoot the three better than 28.4% and shoot better from the field than 30.9%. But it's still early on in the season, and he's had these injuries, so I don't think you should read too much into his averages right now because he will pick it up and they will start rolling. And the Houston Rockets can be extremely dangerous in the West Coast. On another team on the West Coast, the Sacramento Kings, they just got two big players back, De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley. Bagley came back first, and Fox just recently came back. They did just lose, but to have these two players back on a Sacramento Kings team that has been pretty competitive this season, they've been quietly competitive this season, is really important because De'Aaron Fox makes this team go. They play at his pace, and he is one of the fastest players in the league, if not the fastest. So to play at his pace definitely helps. He's got great ability to get to the basket with his pace. He's got good ball handling skills and finds ways to find outlets as well after he's gone underneath the basket. And he's just a great player overall. And Marvin Bagley as well, very productive, finds ways to impact as well. His mid-range game is really good, and his inside post game as well. But yeah, I think the Sacramento Kings can definitely be a dark horse in the Western Conference if they get the right chemistry, the right movement going forward. And having Fox and Bagley back definitely helps. Kyrie had a shoulder injury, and he's coming back very soon. That's big news for the Nets because they've been doing pretty well without him. And so to add another 26 points or whatever he's averaging right now can only help their cause unless they get another situation like the Celtics. But I don't feel like that's going to happen with the Nets because he just seems to be in a better place, especially now that he's with his buddy Kevin Durant. He just seems happier. So I think the Nets will start taking off and definitely start going up the rankings in the Eastern Conference. Like we talked about, Goran Dragic is coming back. He had a groin injury. I think that's going to be a big help. Gordon Hayward has been out, and Marcus Smart has been out, but they're both coming back to a Celtics team that is already playing really well. They weren't serious injuries, at least not Smart's. His was just an eye injury. And then Gordon Hayward's coming back from a foot injury. So if he's able to be productive and Marcus Smart can add what he adds, I think they can be a very competitive team, especially since Marcus Smart is such a great defender. And Gordon Hayward can be lethal on offense when he wants to be. And lastly, Conley had a hamstring issue, and he's going to be missing multiple games. I think that hurts the Jazz. Even though, like I talked about, he has been underperforming, I definitely think he can be a player that can be high impact and find ways to help this young team. The Jazz, they can definitely be a force if they find the right rhythm. A topic I kind of want to touch upon just because it's been in the news. David Stern has been hospitalized, and the NBA put out a statement. It says, NBA Commissioner David Stern remains in serious condition following emergency surgery to address a sudden brain hemorrhage on Thursday. He is receiving great care and surrounded by his loved ones. The Stern family and everyone at the NBA appreciate the incredible outpouring of support. Our thoughts and prayers remain with David and his family. Now, David Stern was the NBA commissioner from 1984 to 2014, and he was an amazing pioneer, let's say, because he really shaped the NBA into what it is today. And you can see the way that players talk about him and appreciate everything he's done because he really helped push the NBA forward. He even helped push the WNBA forward as well. And he really made the league popular. He really pushed it and found a way to market it to where people found it exciting and something people would want to watch. And he also helped extend it to make it a global game as well. So, a lot of people didn't take the NBA seriously. It wasn't America's pastime like baseball, but now it's a huge, huge, huge market. And I think he had a lot to do with the evolution of brands and every player, having their own individualistic touch to what the NBA was and what it represented. He made the league all about the stars and how they wanted to be different. I can't remember who said it. I was listening to someone talk about David Stern recently, and they said that there wouldn't be an Allen Iverson if he decided to play baseball because they wouldn't have that kind of freedom to be who you are. And Allen Iverson is iconic. So David Stern definitely, helped push this league forward, really made it what it is today. And, thoughts and prayers out to him and his family. And I hope, and I'm sure the whole NBA family hopes that, he has a speedy recovery and that he does recover well. But yeah, he's an amazing person, and he was probably the greatest commissioner that the NBA or any sports association has had. So I definitely just wanted to touch on that for just a little bit, and send some thoughts and prayers to his family and him as well. When we return, we will wrap up the show and talk about some performances of the week. So we'll be right back after this.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about some injury updates happening around the league and just how much of an impact it has, because during seasons like this, there are going to be injuries, obviously, and it's going to hurt your team, and sometimes it makes your team better. It shows what you're able to do with adversity and just show your versatility as a team and finding ways to be successful. And, talking about being successful, there were some great performances of the week. We started off with Chris Paul. He beat, with the Thunder, obviously. They beat Chicago a couple days ago, 109-106. And Chris Paul had 30 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals. And that was up against a 39-point outing from Levine. So Chris Paul definitely, he didn't score as many points, but he was super productive. Had a double-double, a near triple-double if he had gotten 2 more assists. And he was kind of turning back the clock, because Chris Paul has these moments where he's fantastic, but he hasn't shown it consistently for a while because he is getting older. And he's on this Thunder team now that just feels a little irrelevant now that Russell Westbrook has left them. So for him to put on a performance like this against a Chicago team that has been very scrappy and has a great star in Zach LaVine, I think it deserved a shout out, and he played an extremely great game. RJ Barrett as well. The Knicks destroyed the Hawks in a game that really didn't matter for the whole landscape of the league because these two are at the bottom of the East. But the Knicks destroyed the Hawks. So really the Hawks are the worst team in the East right now. They lost 143-120. How do you give up 143 points to the Knicks? That's what I want to know. I just really want to know that. RJ Barrett shot 78% and was 10 from 13 from the field. He had 27 points and 6 boards. So the rookie really showed out. He had a really good game. So, he might be trying to insert himself back into the Rookie of the Year race, and I think that he can. I mean, he said in his interview when he first got drafted by the Knicks that he wanted the bright lights of Madison Square Garden. And games like this, if he is able to be a consistent player and put up numbers like this, he can definitely do that and definitely be successful. But the Knicks have a lot to do before he even gets anywhere. So Malik Monk also had a great game. He shot 75% and had 23 points and 10 rebounds and 4 assists in a win against the Sacramento Kings, who, like I said, have been very good and did just get De'Aaron Fox back. So I think that was a very impressive game and an impressive performance. A double-double is always going to get highlighted, and to shoot 75% from the field is even more impressive. So hats off to Malik Monk. Bojan Bogdanovic, He played extremely well the other night. Scored 30 points on 50% shooting with 5 rebounds and 5 assists to add to that. So he had a 35-5 game. I mean, if that's going to be anything, that's a great stat line. And it was in a win, so even better. Kemba Walker, he led the Celtics over the Mavericks tonight, Wednesday night, 109-103 with 32 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. I've talked a lot about Kemba Walker already, but for him to lead his team to a victory over a team that can be very, very dangerous in the West, even without Luka Doncic, I think it speaks to his greatness. And scoring 32 points is pretty good. I expect him to be in the high 20s at least for his point average. So this was a good game for him. Nikola Jokic, who I've been kind of tough on, at least so far in my podcast. I've been saying that he's been very underwhelming, but he had a very good performance against the Orlando Magic, and the Nuggets beat them 113-104. Jokic added 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 12 assists, so he had a double-double, almost a triple-double if he got another rebound, which I think is really funny that rebounds is the category that he missed out on for a triple-double because he's such a big guy, and he's your center, so he's around the basket a lot. I feel like he can definitely grab at least 12 boards a game. He could definitely average that much. But for him to get 12 assists as a center just speaks to his great passing ability. He can do it from the top of the key, from behind the arc, from underneath the basket and people rolling off him. He can do it in pick and rolls. He's really, really versatile. And these are the type of performances that the league expects and that I expect to see. Serge Ibaka, we talked about him earlier. He's been a very high-impact player on the Toronto Raptors, especially since Marc Gasol has kind of been underwhelming. Ibaka's really stepped up and played really well. They beat Detroit 112-99, and Serge Ibaka had 25 points and 13 rebounds with 2 assists. So 25 and 13, that's pretty impressive, especially since Kyle Lowry probably has the ball in his hands a lot. Pascal Siakam as well has a lot of ball touches, but for him to put up 25 points and then grab 13 boards for his team as well, hats off to him. That's a great performance. Drummond had a good performance as well. He had 22 points and 18 rebounds this game. Let me say it again, 22 and 18 rebounds. That's a big game for a big man. And it's funny because he had such a great game and such a great stat line, but Joel Embiid had to do him one better because he had 22 points and 19 rebounds, so just one more rebound better. Markkanen had a great performance as well. He had 31 points and 9 rebounds in a 110-109 win over the Wizards. It's a really close contest, and a team, like I said, is that it's been underwhelming is the Wizards. And for them to lose by 1 point is pretty tough, but Markkanen definitely helped with that, putting up 31 and 9. That's great performance. And then Damian Lillard, he did go off. Let me just say, he did go off against the Golden State Warriors, though, so it's not that impressive because the Warriors have been straight garbage all season. Not even going to sugarcoat it at all. But yeah, Damian Lillard had 31 points, 5 rebounds, and 13 assists. And they did get the win, obviously, over the Warriors, who are the worst team in the NBA now. So definitely expect that from Lillard. He's one of the best point guards in the NBA, an all-star caliber player. So for him to put up 31 points, definitely makes sense. But the 13 dimes is where it really, really is impressive to me. I mean, it's a great performance for him. Even if he's playing the Warriors, doesn't matter. He's still productive. So hats off to him. And he's going to round out our show, actually. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review because that really, really would help us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, it'd be greatly appreciated. I'm Isiah Quiroz. Thank you again, and see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.